My name is Lieven Pauwels. I am Professor of Criminology at Ghent University, the Department of Criminology, and Chair of the Educational Program in Criminology, Director of the Institute for International Research on Criminal Policy. And I'm conducting an interview with Gerben Bruinsma. Gerben, please introduce yourself and say something about your personal history.
Yes, I was born in The Hague, the city of The Hague, in a family. I was the youngest of 4 kids. And after the war, after 6 years after the war, I was born, and everybody was poor at that time, so I was like similar boys raising up in a very good time of the period of life. Even we were poor, we had a lot of fun during my younger time frame. My parents were very eager to that we learn as much as possible, so they stimulated to go to school, and university was no problem at all. Even they didn't have any degree in university or something like that. But because I'm the youngest, everybody was always telling my brothers and sisters, you're the lucky guy. Born on Sunday, you always have luck. Mm-hmm. And they had bad luck, but that's not true, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a very interesting background. We are criminologists, but you have a background in sociology, which is not uncommon. But can you tell me something about the beginning of your career, how you got interested in the research subjects that you have been studying as a sociologist, as a student?
Yeah, it happens as a student. I was studying sociology and I need some specialization for myself. And I knew already that I really wanted to have theoretical sociology as a specialization. But I also was interested in crime and police stuff. And at that time there was no possibility that you could go to another faculty because the criminology was taught in the faculty of law, and my study was in the social sciences department. So I made up my own program. For the last year of my study I organized a traineeship with the youth police in Utrecht City and all kinds of courses in criminology and penology and criminal law and penal law, besides my sociology stuff. And everybody was accepted at that time. There were no administration at all, and both faculties agreed to that. So I could combine my sociology with criminology. Mm-hmm. And then you also need some luck as well, because at that time you had 5 years studying. Mm-hmm. There was no bachelor or master program, just 5 years study. And I haven't finished yet, but I saw an advertisement that they were looking for an assistant professor in criminology at Nijmegen University. And at that time my girlfriend, still my wife, said you should apply. And I said, no way, I can't do that, I'm not good enough to do that. But she said, I will write a letter of application, don't care about that. And that time you have to post it and to type it, and you had no email, remember that. And to my surprise I was invited to come over for an interview. And I made a terrible mistake because I was thinking that the professor was a gentleman, but it was not true, it was a lady. Okay. So, it was at that time very rare that a lady, but I didn't know that at the time. So I made a big mistake anyway. And during the interview I was rolling a cigarette as well. Then I found out that there was a kind of sign saying absolutely forbidden to smoke. So it was a terrible interview anyway. So everything went wrong, so to speak. But one way or the other, and later she said it had something to do with my eyes, but she was lying, of course. I was invited a day after that for the second round with the whole staff. And I need to prepare that for the first time. They sent me a paper they'd written about crime as a micro conflict. And they were telling that all conflicts go into a kind of equilibrium. And I read it and I said, my God, I cannot understand it at all, it's rubbish. But you cannot go to an interview and say it's rubbish, because then so they invited me and I said, oh, maybe this is a little bit in contradiction to page 15, to page 50, and so I made some comments very politely and gentle, of course, and they were looking at each other, oh my god, oh my god. So I was a little bit nervous, and then one of the staff members asked me to mention 10 books, the most important books in criminology. And I had a 9 and I couldn't come to the 10th book, so it felt like a failure at the time, and later they laughed a lot about it. And they accepted me immediately, and I had a job for 5-6 years now. And it was a great time anyway at the Nijmegen University, because at that time there was no administrative pressures, no publications, no impact factors, no one was even concerned about it. So my supervisor, my professor, by the way, we at that time were not allowed to name her with the first name. You should say goodbye professor, good morning professor, and only when I got a degree of PhD, I was allowed to say Ronnie to her. But she was at a big distance, and she asked me just, would I be interested to write a PhD?
Just out of the blue?
Out of the blue. Because we were, at that time, it was very rare. No one ever. Only Nijmegen had a few, and there were colleagues who were working on a PhD, but at that time there were no classes, no structure, nothing. You have to do it yourself. So I said to her, yeah, maybe organized crime is interesting. She said she made up a plan and maybe we can see what we can do. So I made up a plan, but when reading all the stuff, it was so, data was rubbish, you never know what was true and not true. Journalists were writing articles and academics were writing copied articles of journalists.
Yeah.
Police had no idea what organized crime in the Netherlands was, so I said to her after maybe 8 or 9 months, it's better not that I take organized crime as for that reason. And the other reason is when I'm 23, I don't see myself participating in the world, the underworld of the Netherlands as a young guy, so it was absolutely not done. So then I merged something come together. And then she said maybe it's interesting to study the relationship between parents and peers, how they influence the criminal behavior of young people and how they develop given that kind of impact. And that makes me, it makes it very interesting for me, because I was completely free to do whatever I want. So I want to merge the symbolic interest, activist theories about socialization and stuff like that. I read a lot about it, as well as the kind of methodology, we can talk about it later, what I find very interesting and following. They merged together, and I used one of the modified theories according to critical rationalism from Karl Dieter Opp, who modified the whole theory of Sutherland's differential association theory.
Yeah, that's very special, I must say, because basically you mentioned Karl Dieter Opp, and he is a famous German sociologist and one of the major proponents of the critical rationalism, but he wasn't known outside Germany because he wrote in German, as most scholars wrote in their native language at that time. And so you pick up these ideas, and probably because of the fact that you were also teaching philosophy of science and quantitative methods, you learn something about the way hypotheses are dissected very carefully, and that must have had an influence on the way you tested.
Absolutely,
your theory, because when I read your PhD, it still reads like you carefully dissect.
Yeah, and the influence going back to the sociology department where I was studying, but also was a kind of an assistant. It's nowadays impossible that at a young age you are teaching all these kind of courses, but at that time it was possible. And only you can say after so many years it was ridiculous that I teach anyway, because you know so little at that time. But I was influenced by studying all the German critical sociologists, but also the German traditions and books. And that nowadays you cannot give some literature and read in German, but at that time it was very common. So I read all the books and the articles, Adorno, Habermas, Horkheimer, Albert, we read it in German. And I had a very inspiring professor at the time that we had every week we had a book, and we have to lay out all the propositions were made, wrote it on cards, put it on the floor, and then what we need for next connection to make a connection to proposition A, 1 and 2 and 3. And in the end of the day we had a full floor of cards with propositions. Of course it's rubbish at the end, the result, but I learned a lot.
And the professor's name
was Ulte, about Ulte. And he was also, I asked him later as a supervisor as well for my PhD.
Okay.
And so I used that background to make the kind of study in my, to test the theory of Sutherland, using all that background knowledge from methodology as well as theory. I know at that time that my colleagues said, "You are crazy, you should not do that."
Why?
It's above my level, it's too complicated. It's a very complex theory, it's a complex measurement. Most of the concepts Carl Dieter introduced in his modification were never ever used before. So I have to design all kinds of new measurement instruments. So I said to them, then we test first in a pre-test survey what should be done and how the measurement is going to be. I did that with about 200, 300 people, young kids between the age of 12 and 16. So we tested all the instruments. It worked quite well. I have to adjust and a little bit, a few of the concepts, but in general it went quite well. So I can use them all in a new test with 1,200 young people, and then I tested the theory of Sutherland, but also the competitive theories of strain theory and social control theory at the time, because I still believe, at that time I believed that you should compete rival theories in one test. That is the best you can do. But also, if you had some time a few months ago to read my PhD again, and at that time you wrote a book. Nowadays it's just a few articles and then you put some mail in it and that's it. But at the time you wrote a book, so I wrote about the life of Sutherland, I wrote about all the editions he had published, all the changes in the theory, all the tests that have been carried out and how long they were carried out, because it's one of the worst tested theories ever in criminology. And then I moved over to my own study and how I tested it, and then I tested some competitive ideas of crime as well. At that time I already was interested in the history and biography of people, and I'm still am.
Yeah, so that's why you mentioned a lot of how Sutherland's life influenced his work in his PhD. I think you are absolutely right if you say that classic theories never were tested really adequately, because I think that has to do with the methodological tradition. All theories that were developed in criminology before the introduction of critical rationalism and realism were like not formulated in terms of hypotheses, and you seem to have taken a lot of these ideas, and also you mentioned that you need rival theories. So does that mean that you say, I don't believe in theoretical integration, or do you think that the ideas of Lakatos are really important?
The problem of theoretical integration is that we produce more theories, and we never throw away the old ones. So what happens is, if you look at the Claude and Olin kind of modification of enemy theory of Merton, but still we have Merton. And so we made an extra one. And if you now, my presidential address is about proliferation of theories in criminology. If you look now, we have hundreds of theories. Most of them are never tested anyway. Most of them partly are never tested at all. Some are only tested a few times or part-times of parts of the theory. And if you look at the theory of Sutherland, he proposed 9 theses. Only 2 propositions are tested in. And nowadays everybody's saying, Sutherland is saying, deviant peers create deviant delinquency with kids. But never, he even mentioned peers in the theory. So it's a completely misunderstanding of the theory of settlement. And so my way of working is step by step explaining and all the steps I take to get to some real proposition that can be tested in empirical research. And I still, I'm interested and also advocate at every time again, you can guess whatever you want, it's free and you should do that, but you should solidly test what you are saying. That's a kind of bound ground base of my own ideas about science and how it works. With all the limitations criminology has. I realize that immediately. We are not physics,
no, and even in physics,
even in physics, but I always say in German they have a kind of acceleration of atoms, and they can shoot all kind of atoms through a tunnel. But that's, in life it's much more complicated. We have to do with people who are lying or saying not the truth. We are dealing with police figures and police officers who are not, you have strategic stuff. So our basic the basic empirical data we rely on is very questionable all the time. And that makes the whole, our discipline so vulnerable that we can continue ideas, bring out new ideas and new theories, and no one tested solidly one way or the other the theory.
Yeah, but I think the vulnerability is at the same time also the strength, because even despite the fact that it's vulnerable, you still keep going on because you know that limitations can be overwhelmed. I think what you're saying is that the philosophical background to use is used as not just a way of testing conflicting hypotheses, but also as a way of keeping believing in science despite the fact that you know that there are limitations. And I think that's a very important issue, because
I'm not skeptical in the sense that nothing works out here or everything is in vain. No, we should keep on trying as best as we can. And not that one method or one data collection is sacred and the others are stupid. I did a lot of quantitative work. I also did a lot of qualitative work during my career. So I know the advantages and disadvantages of all these sources of data and what kind of thing. And sometimes I read articles or in the newspaper stuff that we conclude from research this and this and this. And I said to myself, how can you justify this conclusion given that kind of data collection, that kind of limitations we have? We should be more modest about that.
Why are people, or why would it be that contemporary scholars, or some contemporary scholars, if you mentioned this, are not that critical? Is this because there's a lack of attention for philosophy of science in contemporary criminology courses? Or, because you are obviously very much influenced by philosophy of science, and you can see the impact of it in the way you write down your work, the way you
there's something going on in the discipline of criminology. Other disciplines that look similar to criminology have the same kind of phenomenon, but it is more and more fragmented. And there are more schools of thought busy fighting against each other, and that theory is the only real one theory. And the others are rubbish. That's not how life is.
No, that's
they talk. And they are busy fighting to each other in a not rational way. Not with arguments, not with data, not with empirical tests or something like that, but just because you are trained like to promote the same theory, you are not good. That's ridiculous.
That's human irrational.
So that's kind of irrational. So of course you have some own favorite of theories, but that's one of the reasons why I'm still trying to test as much theories in one research, that you have competitors coming in, rivals as well, to give them the same chance to get refuted or to be confirmed. And I think that you make much more and better progress in science if you continue that. Not by one person, of course, but as a community.
As a community.
As a community, not by one person. Instead of just testing your own idea and behave like a guru who is saying, I know everything and I'm the truth. And that's not how it works in science, and it should not work like that in science.
One of the points you've raised a couple of times is the idea in criminology that there is not the situation of pluralism, but some kind of false pluralism. Can you
I call it pseudo-pluralism going on. That some theories are presented as rivals, but the unit of analysis is completely different. Some are talking about they have the unit of analysis of a neighborhood, sorry, and some are talking about individuals, and some have some ideas about criminal organizations of institutions. So you cannot compete that because the unit of analysis is different, and the dependent variables are always very different. And so you have to be very careful to say we are rivals, but you have to make it real rivals. By the way, it's a terrible job to do.
It is.
To make it a real rival. And I tried a lot in my career to make them as much as comparable, so they have the same kind of critical assessment.
Yeah, this is a red thread in your work. I'd like to ask some other questions which are related to your work. You obviously have been into testing theories for a long time, and then, but at some point in time you made choices, and then you were one of the co-founders of the International Police Institute in the Netherlands in Twente, and then you became director of the NSCR, which was of course a very important step. So your influence on Dutch criminology is quite huge. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? How is it to combine all these administrative issues with your scientific work? Because you can't do everything at the same time, so it's well, exceptional, I would say. So
no, it's not exceptional. Most people are working in science, or hard-working people. If I look around me in criminology, there are so people working so hard, and even I have to bow to people that they produce and work so hard. During your career you come at a certain point, and you cannot predict that in advance, that you say, now it's time that I should lead something. And then you need some luck that other people will give you the opportunity to do that. For instance, I was in public administration and department. I was the head of the methodology section at that time, but I had a professor of sociology above me, and we were in a kind of state of war all the time. So I didn't want to fight anymore, and I said I want to go home and look for another job. So I get to the dean saying I don't want to work longer with this guy. He is so destructive, he's not productive, he's just anti-everything. And I don't want to work with people who is always opposing everything. That's terrible, you have an organization. So the dean said to me, now you stay, he should go out. So I get the opportunity to build up my own institute, the International Police Institute at that time. So I was in policing and police study. I did all kind of observational studies as well. And leading an institute, you learn so much about people as well. And you can mold it a little bit as well to your own ideas. You're not dictated, that's the worst thing you can do. But you can influence it more or less. And then I get the opportunity to become the director of the NSCR. And it's a very special institute. Most of the people don't know that as an institution, because it is not a university institute. It is an institute, a research institute of the National Organization of Scientific Research. Like they are a granting organization of 650 million euros a year, and they grant all the fundings of universities for a research project, but they have 8 research institutes on physics and sea research and stuff like that, and the NSCR is one. And we are established to do some basic fundamental research in the area of criminology, because criminology is in effective law situated, like most European countries do. And we needed that interdisciplinary kind of look inside. So this institute was built for that. And I came over, I have to reorganize it. I did it very strong, too strong for some people probably. But I get up all kind of people from different universities to work for the NSCR. I established 3 new research lines on environmental criminology, or geographical criminology, you call it, life course, and about the criminal justice system, how it functions and works and stuff like that. because there was none of this kind of research going on in the Netherlands in criminology.
So you detected these three research lines as
Very important lines of research that didn't exist at that time. In 1999, when I arrived at Leiden at the NSR. And so I have to build up the whole idea. So I created all kind of new projects and I worked on it. There's other people, of course, not showing the idea, but I built it up slowly but steady after so many years. And also I make understandable for most of us that we should work international as possible. And till 2005 there was no publication of a Dutchman in criminology, the high-ranked American journal. And the first was from NSCR, and nowadays we have about 5 articles each year in each volume at least. So that says something about that we really make advancements and progress at the Institute. And it was great fun to do that, because the people were great, and I always enjoy that. That explains a lot. If you enjoy your work and you work with nice colleagues, with productivity and creativity, that is always fun, and then time is no issue anymore.
Yeah, but I still think it's important not only just to like your job, but also to create bridges between different countries. And one of the issues that I think is important, that probably contributed to the success of Dutch criminology and the NSCR at that time, was that you strongly tried to connect internationally by also inviting international scholars to the Netherlands. And I remember the conferences the NSCR organized, where, for example, Bob Bursik, that was in 2003 or 2002, a long time ago. That must have given a lot of vibes to young scholars at that time. I mean, I was one of these PhD students at that time, so I was really into this kind of movement, I would say.
I made a rule for myself that if you want to establish an institute and to make some progress, you should work with the best people in the world as much as possible. And where they are, even if in Saudi Arabia or in Australia or in the United States, it doesn't matter. And because of the dominance of the American criminology, especially around the millennium period, you have more people going to the United States. But that helps a lot, the Institute, and people helping us as much as possible. A number of those people we invited the first time in 2002 to the Institute, they're still active one way or the other as a co-producer or a co-author or whatever, and that stimulated a lot of the young people present at that time at the NECR.
You mentioned the dominance of, you say American criminology, but I could say just more in general, English traditions, the Anglo-Saxon tradition. Do you think that this has got anything to do with the fact that in Europe criminology is related to faculties of law, and that methodological issues were introduced much later? If I look at the US and England, I see relationships between criminology and sociology. So methodology has been developed maybe not earlier in the development of the discipline as a whole. Do you think that had a strong impact, or that is one of the major factors that explain the dominance of these theories? Because we had also theories in Europe.
Yes, but there is hardly any empirical research in the Netherlands, or in Europe at that time. I said hardly, there of course always tried some people, but it's very rare, so to speak. And most of the European countries do not have the funding, do not have the abilities or the capacity. If you are trained as a lawyer, you're not sophisticated in methodology and quantitative kind of analyzing techniques and statistical tools. So you need to have that in your team. But if you are in the faculty of law, you are limited. And besides that, lawyers want to have that you choose as a criminologist subjects that is related, you are related to the criminal justice system, that you talk about and prisons and police, they understand that. But the geographical mobility of offenders, that's too far away from their own thoughts. So they don't like to have this kind of research in their faculty. So they always say, go to the social sciences or the geographical science. And that limits the development of the discipline in some countries at the end. So the NECR is a good construction how you can overcome this kind of boundaries made by faculties, that you bring in all kinds of disciplines in one institute and make some progress, otherwise would have never been achieved. And I think that's, and the other thing is, of course, as Michael Tony observed quite well, that in Europe we are much more interested in one way or the other, the human rights stuff, and normative side of the whole system. We don't want to hurt people. That's our aim. Our prevention idea is stronger living. And in the United States, in general, of course, there's always people thinking otherwise, but in general say we need to be effective. The police control should be 100%, and the prison rate after prison you should have 0% of recidivism. And we are not talking in this kind of ideas. We're talking much more what kind of opportunities people have when they leave the prison or the sentence or whatever punishment, and can this person build up a new life without crime or without all the danger and stuff. We are much more concerned about the normative standard also in life as criminologists. So,
and by normative standard you mean la condition humaine, the human conditions.
Absolutely.
People need to be able to build up or rebuild up their lives, even when they did things wrong in their lives.
You never see a cost-effective study of prisons in Europe, for instance. No, we are talking about how life is in prison, how we damage people, or give it some idea that given that period of time in your life, with training and stuff like that, can you cope with life after you have been released? That's a different focus, and you see that more in Europe than in the United States. Generally speaking.
In general, I mean, I can partially agree with that. If I look at the differences between Europe and the US, the normativity is something that is, I mean, it's popping out, but also in the sense that normative criminology sometimes means that you need to study this or this. Anyhow, I think bridging is the important issue in this talk here.
And that's also challenging for the European Society of Criminology, of course, because we have so many countries, so many languages, so many criminal law systems, and different researchers with different backgrounds. To bring them together in a meeting point, that is an achievement anyway. And that we are increasing and stuff like that. Compared to the American Society of Criminology, is a professional organization, well organized, but you have only one country, and all people know each other, by the way, they have no language differences. Everybody speaks the same language, it's easier. Here it's much more complicated to bring the Italians and the Norwegian and the Ukrainian people and have a debate going on human rights or whatever, or the different career people move to crime or to rehabilitation. That makes it more fun to do that.
You were one of the co-founders of the European Society of Criminology, and I just wondered some thoughts on the European Society. If you look back, obviously, I mean, it's already the 16th edition, so there's a lot going on. What do you think is or are the key challenges for a European society in the future? Are there some ideas? I mean, you've also functioned as the president of the European Society, so you were very closely involved in the ESC board all the time. What are the key challenges for European criminology to keep it sticking?
First of all, I would say that it's great how the European Society develops anyway. If you look at the number of members, if you look at the number of attendees and conferences, that is increasingly coming up. And that astonishes me every day again. because I never thought that it would be such a success. But the most important thing is we need a meeting point, and the European Society can bring the people together. But the work should be done by the working groups. And I'm lucky to see, and I'm glad to see, that we have so many different working groups working on, so people have some shared interest in kind of research topics, and working together from different countries, making some volumes, sharing some data, discussing ideas, and that will help everybody, even the criminology departments who are not so rich and have no data or whatever. So bring them together, and I think that's a wonderful opportunity for European criminologists to come together in working groups, and they share the data and stuff like that. So that is very important. And of course a journal that makes, and a newsletter also makes some important contributions as well. So it's quite a success. I don't know how it will be the next 50 years, but probably it will be offline, and we will exist at that time as well.
I think the idea of working groups is something you need to remember. When I look back at my experiences of joining the ESC conferences, my first conference was the third conference in Helsinki, and I think there were indeed no working groups, but, or not that I know of anyway, it was my first conference, but it was only a couple of hundred persons, so it booming, and sometimes I think, I mean, can we become the victim of our own success, or am I now just being a pessimist?
It has also something to do that criminology matured a little bit more, and it's always coming up a little bit and going down, the number of criminologists. And we now, we see that all kinds of countries put more interested in to have more criminologists in working in the government or universities and departments in all kinds of countries in Europe. So you have more people who are actively doing research in criminology fields, and they need a platform. And Europe is one of the platforms we can offer it, because most of the research, the Americans are not interested in the police in Moldavia. So you need some European contacts to have this kind of discussions going on, and otherwise you get lost in the American Society meeting with 4,000 or 5,000 people. And here is a better platform to present their new ideas and discuss them with people who are present at that time.
Yeah, well, maybe one way to, it's just an idea, to increase coherence is by trying to talk about all these different problems in different European countries at a more abstract level, so that everybody recognizes something of the problem. And it then can criminology become what you have just called a meeting point. Shall I translate it like that?
Yeah, something like
meeting point.
Meeting platform, so to speak.
I think, I mean, this is obviously a good idea, because criminology is by definition an object science. We look at
but it doesn't make sense if you just walk in your session, you present your paper, you leave immediately. That makes no sense. Sometimes you see it happen at certain conferences. You see that more often than in others. It's ridiculous. I'm not just. I can read it if necessary. The fun is that people can present something and raise some questions or issues that are still unsolved, or you want some hints or clues how to solve the problems or the limitations, and then a panel session makes sense, and that makes it more fruitful and more productive for all who are present. But if you just run in, present and run away, you're not interested in the people, what they have to say. So you have to be, the organization should be well done and organized every time and again, and because we have, that's also one of the flavors I said of European society, that we are going to different countries and different areas. We're going to Cardiff, and then we go to Sarajevo, we have been in Helsinki, we have been in Bologna, and that makes it fun, because it's not always the same in a big hotel, like in the United States, where you have Atlanta, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles, and that's it. And now you come here and you see something from the flavor of the culture and the people, the beers and the fun also, and that makes it like fun to go here.
That's important. I mean, I would agree with that. I have some additional questions on your current research interests. Obviously, you're not just interested in juvenile delinquency and its causes. You mentioned other phenomena. You also mentioned policing. If you look back at the past 10 years, what are the most important lessons you learned from your research projects that you were involved in most? I particularly think of the SPAN project, but there were probably other projects as well.
And what I learned more is that working with a group of young people together is one of the glorious moments in your daily life activities, that you have an open discussion what's good and not good. Write together articles and that is good. But the other way around is that we are much more coming to all kinds of interaction between the environment, the local environment, the setting, and all kinds of propensities. And one of the problems of criminological theories in the past, so to speak, was Sutherland and Merton and all the older people, is they write about propensities. You are more prone to commit a crime if you have this and this condition. And now, bringing in the environmental criminology research findings in this kind of meeting points, in research, bringing together the environment and the individual stuff, we can say more about the interaction of the setting where people are in and their own morality or whatever. And that makes some progress, I think, in our thinking about theory and how complicated the mechanisms are, why people commit crime. Because in general you could say, the causal theory is saying we can predict that people have condition A, B, C and D, and then they will commit a crime. But what crime, at what moment, and they have no idea. And you should be more specific, so to speak, sorry. That you say, at one setting, at what certain setting would you commit a certain particular crime. That makes it more precise, more difficult to research, but you can nowadays. And it's not only by quantitative data, but you can do some observational studies. We never observe anymore. Have you seen criminologists walking on the street, observing people, how they behave or what they are doing? No, they send out emails with questionnaires, or they dig up the files of the police, and that's it. But we have now much better instruments to our disposal. For instance, cameras. We can use cameras to study why some moment that triggers to violence and why not. Given the surrounding and the people who are present and stuff like that. We can use CCTV for that purpose. We can observe and photograph people and look what they are doing. And we can make some progress in that area as well. It's an addition, it's not instead of, but more kind of addition. And that I learned from the last 10 years probably, that we can make some progress if we take more time to think about what are really the mechanisms why people commit crimes. And then we can learn more about it. And to my own idea, and I've been criticized for that many times, that I'm not really a policy interested person. I must say.
Not?
No.
But how do you say policy? Because obviously you need funding and...
Yeah, but get rid of this kind of funding. I have seen so many funding that the outcome of the research should be like this, and then you get the money. I don't like this kind of research. I'd like to be independent. But also, you need some more modesty as a criminologist.
What do you mean by that?
Because we sometimes give advices how we solve the problem of crime, or the prevention should be like this, or the treatment should be like that. But the basis, the empirical basis, is not solid enough to give this kind of advices. So a little bit modesty should be in criminologists, by the way. And we don't know the reality better than ordinary people, or people in law enforcement, or mayors, or other people. You have to be careful about that. You should be...
But I might hope so that scientists know it a little bit better than mayors.
Now we can systemize it much better. But then we come to the main corner point of what I'm saying all the time, that we made a lot of progress in criminology, you cannot deny that, in the last 30, 40 years. Much in statistical tools and methodology. But the data are still as in the 60s. We use the self-report, people are lying, people are denying, whatever, or we rely on other stuff. So we have to be very careful, can we kind of conclusions draw about that. And so we try to do our best as much as possible, because criminology is a lot of fun. But once in a while you should think about, are we doing the right things in the right way? And this question is hardly ever posed in courses or in lectures or in overviews. We should do more about, and now I'm interested more in that, nowadays, the historical development of criminology. I'm preparing a book about that, and I hope to finish that in 2 years, hopefully. And how the developments were in criminology, what was good and what bad. In my view, of course, there are other observations possible, but that's important. So, and also read the old authors by themselves, I always say. So I love to read the Thomas presidential address about settings. It's so clear, it's so, and we have forgotten that for about 50 years, 60 years. And it's so interesting to do that. And I'm not saying that they are the opus magnum and the deus ex machina that helps you out all kind of problems, but it brings you some ideas about that the old people, the classics, have thought about many things quite well. But also they have mistaken many times. And we found that out in all kinds of research going on. So you can learn from the history, the good things and the bad things, and how the science progressed through the ages.
So there again you see influence of other scholars of philosophy and science.
Absolutely.
Thomas Kuhn, for example.
Yeah. Now I found out that I was in the beginning the follower, so to speak, of Karl Popper. And now you said no one is following Popper.
No. Well,
we never reject any theory in our discipline. Never. So Popper can be completely wrong, or nobody listens to Popper. That could you can. I don't know the answer, by the way. But that's how it happens. In practice, we have not things like that, that we propose a theory, we test that, and if we refute that, we throw it away immediately. That's not how it works in science. It's much more complicated.
Maybe we are afraid of throwing away ideas.
That's also true.
I think you mentioned one thing. I'm going to ask you some final questions about the future developments of criminology, but you mentioned that people do not read the classic scholars enough, I mean in depth. Do you mean by that people are getting the knowledge of the criminology classics just by reading textbooks and textbook knowledge? That's something I sometimes experience in classes, but that's of course students, you can't compare students with scholars. But
even scholars haven't read classics.
And
many times when you read a summary of let's say for instance Sutherland, and they say Peirce causes crime with youngsters. Sutherland never used the word Peirce in a theory, and it's much more complicated.
Well, IDs copy, and then if bad IDs copy, then...
So everybody is reading, and then in textbooks that same text, and then you bring up and raise up new generations of criminology, but just a stereotype kind of versions of the theory. And also because of the journals want to have everything brief, short as possible, that they force the authors not to write extensively about the theory A, B, or C, but you should that in 1 or 2 paragraphs. And that also produces all kinds of stereotypes of the theory, and leave out all the complexities and the causal mechanism, the underlying mechanism. They are much more complicated than we sometimes assume and write about in the journals. And so we need more books.
More books.
Also.
So you say more books.
And people need to read that kind of books, not just journals.
Does that mean less journals? Because I mean.
No, I'm not saying less journal. It's more addition. If you look back in your career, you are influenced by books, not by a journal article.
No.
And why are you influenced by book A, B, or C? We have no idea, by the way, how certain why certain kind of science, type of science, you like that very much or not like that, or hate it maybe. There is no personality research going on in science researchers. What kind of personalities attract kind of type of research? And we should know more about that topic. But if you ask me about the future of criminology, there's a new area coming up, and we found it already. There's all new data coming up. Social media, Twitter, cameras, people have every time of the day they can film and use them. And we should use that more and more often. Get away from the police figures. Get away from the police files as much as possible. Do some more observational stuff. Use Twitter or whatever to see how people think about the legal justice system. Not just the old-fashioned opinion, yes, agree, and then support the system, yes, no. You have no idea. But actually, how they support. And of course, you have to be very careful because it's not solve everything. But it opens new ideas. But you have to be critical also again about reliability, validity. Do we really measure what we really want to measure? If you do that, then the world can be opened in the next couple of years that maybe can helpful to give a new boost to criminology in the future.
I would agree. I think there's quite a lot of work to do, especially in social media. If you refer to this as a way of measuring crime by new methodologies, Google is probably measuring much more about us and our behavior and when we cross the road.
Facebook also, all kinds of networks they have, and they can create that immediately for you.
So I think this is plenty of stuff to think about. Are there any other final words, issues you think we didn't talk about this during
we have to talk about, because I've also been involved in organized crime research in the past. And one of my own highlights in my career, I must say, is when I was invited by the Parliamentary Inquiry Committee at the time, 1995, to do research on the organized crime situation in the Netherlands at that time. Together with Schil Feyenoord, who was the leader of the group, Henk van der Bunt and Van Bovenkerk. And we worked very hard for a year, and we got all the data. We interviewed hundreds of people and documents, and we got all the secret information we needed to, and intelligence-led kind of information of the Secret Service stuff, to build up what's going on in the Netherlands at the time. And I learned so much about it, and it was fun to do. It ruined my health at the time, probably, because I have only free on Saturday evening 2 hours and on Sunday morning 2 hours, and the rest of the week was from 7 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock, 9. And at that time we had no email.
Indeed.
We had no mobile phone, so we have to communicate by phone on the road, doing stuff. I learned a lot about it. That's very important. And the second is, together with David Waarsbuurt, I edited the Encyclopedia of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And that was only possible by the internet, because otherwise a mail system. And we compiled with the help of all people. It's about 900 authors and editors and sub-editors and stuff like that. We managed to publish 10 volumes of together 5,600 pages. What's going on in criminology?
That was like this?
Yeah, there was much higher than that now, but printed it is something like that. But I learned so much about it, how criminology is organized, how the fields are organized, how the schools of thought are organized, completely different schools. And from one kind of type of researcher, you contacted him and he said, I'm not interested to deliver a chapter. He said, why not? Yeah, who cares? And in another field, they sitting together, an email, and they said, we should have this kind of chapters in, and who's taking care for that and that and that. So representing that field much better. And I see a lot of loners in the field.
What do you mean by loners?
Loners, they just work for themselves. They have no colleagues around them, they have no research group with them, And I think that's the worst situation you can get in. Only a few people are so brilliant that they have excellent ideas by themselves and don't need anybody.
Yeah.
But what I learned during my time at the NSR is that you can only be creative and critical to yourself also when you have people around you who trigger you, who wants to attack you and fight with you about ideas and have a beer, of course, afterwards. But you learn so much more, and the quality of your work is increasing immediately. So it's not good that people sitting alone in a ceiling and think, I'm brilliant and I have a brilliant theory, but I'm the only one who knows that theory. That's not how science progresses. Science progresses in another way.
Yeah.
And that I learned from the encyclopedia. The other thing is that I found out that Americans know absolutely nothing about Europe.
What do you mean by that?
They have no idea what kind of research is going on in Europe.
And why would that be?
I don't know what it is. It's difficult. For instance, I want to have chapters on policing and police, and especially about the history of police, because it's important. People know how police forces develop. And they come up with an Alaska kind of police station they found out that's all. And I said, go to India. We have a long history of Indian police. In Europe, we have the French police, and coming up from the gendarmerie in the 16th, 17th century. No idea. Life course. What life course? Yeah, Farrington they know. But there are all kinds of life course studies going on in Europe. They have no idea. So that was my role also, together with David's role, that we should combine as much. I bring in Australians and Europeans in the encyclopedia as much as possible.
Okay.
That people know that there is interesting research going on in Europe. And at some time we can think, do we really need to sell our research? But I think it's important to do that, and continuously.
I mean, especially when you talk about theories, and theories should be valid everywhere, then at least it should be also valid in Europe.
And that would be ideal, that you said, okay, we want to test social disorganization in Nigeria or in India. And if you think about that, immediately you're saying, this is ridiculous. The theory is not valid for Nigeria. And I'm now editing another Oxford handbook on environmental criminology, and we have a chapter on an African city where social disorganization has been tested with all the difficulties for data collection and stuff like that, because an African city is completely different built up. But then you see the limits of these so-called universal theories, and they apply more of the time just to American cities, but not to European cities or African cities. So you can learn more about the validity of theories when we properly test them in other contexts.
Indeed.
And that would be wonderful if you can work in the future with, although I've been in China, it will be difficult to have the right data, by the way. But if you can test all kinds of ideas we have now developed in the West, how they apply in India, China, Thailand, Africa, South America, we have no idea.
No, we should have.
We should have, but we have no idea.
Indeed. Well, if I would try to summarize, which is extremely difficult, I would say stick together, cohesion, but check your guesses.
Yeah.
Check your
That's
guesses
it.
as science.
That's
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for this very interesting interview.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.